And shift our focus to another story that we're tracking very closely. In fact, India's deft diplomacy has delivered. LPG tanker Symi has reached Kandla in Gujarat. The port Marshall Island-flagged tanker that has arrived loaded with 20,000 tons of LPG. And this LPG tanker has arrived in Gujarat is what we're learning so far. And we will be showing you visuals as well. The Marshall Islands-flagged tanker Symi, carrying approximately 20,000 tons of the LPG, has arrived at the Kandla Port. Let's tell you more about this LPG tanker because this is a Marshall Islands-flagged LPG carrier currently heading to Gujarat. It has already arrived there. It is carrying 20,000 metric tons of the LPG and it left from Qatar and has arrived in Gujarat already. It safely transited the Strait of Hormuz around 13th of May and today on 16th it has already arrived in Gujarat. Let me go across to my colleague Mayank, who's been tracking all the details. Mayank, tell us more about the Strait of Hormuz, how Indian vessels, they have been allowed to pass through there, because in the last 2.5 months, many of the LPG tankers, CNG tankers and other oil tankers, they have arrived in the country. And in the latest, we're learning that a Marshall-flagged tanker named is Symi that is carrying around 20,000 tons of the LPG that has already arrived in Gujarat. Take us through more details.
It is a very important news, actually. And before this, there were almost 15 LPG vessels which had moved towards India. And I mean, these had been larger vessels, but in this case, what is being told is that the source is Qatar. So it becomes very important because the passage, I mean, for the larger understanding of the place, the Strait of Hormuz is not only should not be linked only to Iran, because there are lots of other exporting nations and they export energy and fuel for India also, which includes UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. So what it happens is actually it will affect positively, because if the news is that the said ship is coming from Qatar, then that means the other countries have been able to at least export energy for India. That's that holds a very important significance for at least India's energy, because not only from Iran side, the other countries will be able to get their vessels moving for India. So it is really important. And see, it needs to be brought out that India had been in talks with other nations, including Iran, so that its vessels should be given permission or allowed to move from that side, for very significant for India's energy security.
Absolutely, and India meets about 60 to 65% of the LPG demand through the imports, and roughly 90% of those imports originate from the Persian Gulf, and almost 80 to 90% of the India-bound LPG cargoes transiting the Strait of Hormuz. And that is quite important because this is very significant intervention from India, because the Strait of Hormuz, that is not just a regional waterway, it is one of the world's most critical energy routes that has been blocked on one hand by Iran, and on another, the naval blockade that we have been witnessing as far as US is also concerned. Coming back to you, Mayank, on this, India meets about 60 to 65% of the LPG demand through imports, and we're learning that many of it, 80 to 85%, comes from the Persian Gulf, and that is why the Strait of Hormuz is quite important. Take us through how many of the ships, be it LPG, CNG or crude oil, those ships have arrived in India in the last 2.5 months.
See, 15th was the last count, and we had broken that story. Times Now was the one which brought the story first for the viewers. And this is important because the source is Qatar, and we had already signified in that case. And just for sake of understanding of the viewers, this place or this passage is very, very important for in multiple ways, not only the fuel and energy security, for agricultural purposes also, to the extent, specifically when we talk about urea, 70% of urea had been coming from that side. That is the kind of a significance we can underline as far as the passage, once it is allowed from that side, it is going to significantly affect India in multiple ways. Liquefied natural gas, compressed natural gas, CNG, which we are using. So, and the costing which we have already seen risen by 2 rupees or 3 rupees in case of petrol is because of that reason only. So, if passage is allowed, that is going to buffer and also alleviate the kind of a situation which we are facing. The world is facing, in fact. Let us bring that point, not only India. So this is the kind of significance of Strait of Hormuz is for India at least.
Absolutely. In fact, when it comes to LPG, our country mainly depends on the Gulf countries, and because of the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, there has been some concern there. But at this point in time, we're learning that another LPG tanker carrying 20,000 ton of the LPG that has already arrived in the country. Thanks so much, Mayank, for getting us all those details.